Somebody doing their work. We're live. Folks, we are live on Facebook, Twitter, and hello, everybody. Welcome back. Facebook, Twitter, my friend. Dan, how's this sound? Can you hear me now? Okay, we'll make it. Let's see. How about that? Yeah. So how does this sound? Can you hear me out there at the curb? Yes. Well, for some of us, it's a good morning, and we offer peace and greetings to everyone. Hello, welcome to Starvin for Justice, the 30th annual fast and vigil to abolish the death penalty at the U.S. Supreme Court. We have been doing this now. This is our 30th year. You can imagine that. 30 years out here, starving for justice. We're waiting for this U.S. Supreme Court to actually live up to the lie that is carved into the face of this building. You see those 4 words up there? Equal justice under law. Anybody that's experienced the legal system in this country knows that that is not what we've got. And there's going to be a lot of choice words about that today as we look at what's going on with the capital punishment in the United States. My name is Abe Bonowitz. I'm the Executive Director of Death Penalty Action. And we are here as the Abolitionist Action Committee, groups from all over the country and internationally standing united for an end to state-sponsored killing. This is an important anniversary. It is the 51st anniversary of the Furman decision. 51 years ago, this court decided that the death penalty as it was then being practiced was unconstitutional. It was arbitrary, capricious. You could no more predict a death sentence than a lightning strike. And that was wrong, and they decided they had to strike down all of the death penalty laws, and that's what they did. And states that wanted to have a death penalty had to write new laws, which they did. Florida had a special session of its legislature in November of 1972, just to write a new death penalty law. Within a couple of years, many states had death penalty laws. Hundreds of people were on death row again. And on July 2nd, 1976, the Gregg decision was handed down, and that allowed the resumption of executions. There's often a misnomer about that. People say the Supreme Court abolished the death penalty. It did not. They said they put a moratorium on the death penalty. It did not. They just said we can't do it as we're currently doing it. And like I said, Florida put in the death penalty within months. And within a year or two, people are being sentenced to death. And I got to tell you something, friends. Chuck can tell us this. As soon as a cop says you're going to fry for this, buddy, that is when the terror of the death penalty starts. And that's when the death penalty exists. So we're here every year, these two anniversaries from June 29th, the anniversary of the Furman decision, to July 2nd, the anniversary of the Gregg decision. I'm going to need somebody to take over for Cantor Zusman because I'm going to introduce him here in a moment. We are today, among other things, aware of and watching what's happening in Pittsburgh, where there is a trial on to decide whether or not we're going to kill the man who shot up the Tree of Life Synagogue in Pittsburgh. We oppose the death penalty in all cases. Can you get one of those victims, that sign that's right under there. We remember the victims, but not with more killing. We remember the victims, but not with more killing. And today, we have a special moment of prayer to remember the victims in the Tree of Life shooting. I want to welcome my co-founder of L'Chaim, Jews Against the Death Penalty, and a good friend and a mentor and a man who has done so much work to lift the spirits of people facing death in this country.
I love your book.
And he is here. He'll tell us more about what he's going to do. He's going to pray for us in Hebrew. He's going to pray for the victims in that particular killing, and by extension, all victims of murder. Cantor Mike Zusman.
Thank you, Abe. It's a solemn honor to be here, and thank God we are here to stand this ground and to lift up the value of life. L'chaim means to life, and I'm here with Abe on behalf of the 2,600 members of L'chaim, Jews Against the Death Penalty. This is a global issue, and therefore it is also a Jewish issue. The next person to be scheduled for execution in Texas is a Jewish man. He's a pen pal of mine, scheduled for execution on October the 10th, which is World Day Against the Death Penalty. Texas almost executed another Jewish inmate 2 years ago around Yom Kippur, the holiest day of the year. We are here, as we are for every execution vigil, so that we know that we stand on the side of life. And we always remember the victims. We always remember the victims at every vigil. We start with this traditional Jewish prayer for the victims. And that's what we're going to do today. You can see I have here a picture of the 11 victims, Aleichem HaShalom, peace upon them now, who were killed in the Tree of Life massacre. I'll be reciting their names in Hebrew as part of this prayer in Hebrew. I'll chant it, I'll recite it in English first and then chant it in the Hebrew. God, filled with mercy, dwelling in the heavens' heights, bring proper rest beneath the wings of your Shekhinah, your divine presence, amid the ranks of the holy and the pure, illuminating like the brilliance of the skies the souls of all those who have given up their lives in affirmation of your holy name. Joyce Feinberg, Richard Gottfried, Rose Mallinger, Cecil Rosenthal, David Rosenthal, Bernice Simon, Sylvan Simon, Daniel Stein, Melvin Wax, Irving Younger, Dr. Jerry Rabinowitz. May you, who are the source of mercy, shelter them beneath your wings eternally and bind their souls among the living. that they may rest in peace. And let us say, Amen. And here is that prayer in the Hebrew. El malei rachamim shochen b'meromim hametzei menucha nechona tachat kanafei השכינה במעלות קדושים וטהורים כזוהר הרקיע מזהירים את נשמות יוסף בן חיים ואת רזל בן הבת אברהם ואת סיסל חיים בן אליעזר ואת דוד בן אליעזר ואת בילה רחל בת משה ואת זלמן שכנם בן מנחם מנדל ואת דניאל אברהם בן ברוך ואת משה גדול בן יוסף ואת יצחק חיים בן מנחם ואת יהודה בן יחזקאל וסלמה ואת עידית בתך בת אבא מנחם שמסרו את נפשם על קידוש השם פניו הרחמים אז תסתירם בצל כנפיך לעולמים וצרור בצרור החיים את נשמתם וינוחו ושלום על משכבם ונאמר
How's it looking, Dan? Oh, yeah, you back on here?
I can't move right now, baby. I'm sorry.
Dan, can you see this?
Is that better or worse?
We're back up?
Yeah.
So what do you think of the affirmative action decision? Great, right?
Chuck? Okay, it sounds like we're back up. Okay, we're good. Ready? Chuck, come on, everybody.
Hey! Hello, good morning, good afternoon. I'm literally lucky to be here. 51 years ago today, the Supreme Court temporarily abolished the death penalty in New York on death row, and it affected 5 men who were there, and about 600 women and men around the country. I felt, of course, that it was a great decision, a great evolutionary step for the country, for the criminal justice system, and was a trendsetter in the sense that a lot of countries look to the United States for guidance and to emulate their systems, blah blah blah. But today, the United States stands kind of alone in the Western world with the death penalty. Europe has essentially abolished it altogether. My own personal case is really of no importance, but I never took a life, and interestingly, 4 of the 5 men who were on death row in New York never actually took a life, but were tried under various felony murder doctrines and so on. I was just talking to several students from an agricultural school, and there's from one gentleman, young man was from Idaho, and there's a case out there that it's a death penalty case, and 4 people, I believe, were killed. And it's cases like that, that just overwhelm your senses and reason and everything, and create the atmosphere where people say, "What are you going to do with somebody like this, with this monster, with this devil?" And it's hard to argue against that, when women or children are killed. But many of the people who are sent to death row, many are not evil or monstrous or caught up in circumstances of their life. Many are innocent. There's been 1,500 plus executions since 1972. There's been also something like close to 200 exonerations. Exonerations mean people were either innocent or the trial process was so terrible that they were denied a fair trial. Think about that. For every execution that took place, every 10 executions, 1 person was found to be innocent on death row.
Chuck, tell us about what it was like when they came and told you that you weren't going to be killed.
Well, I almost pooped my pants, Yeah, one of the guards who worked on death row in New York, come up to the cell, and he kind of said in a low voice, he said, "Hey, you just heard the death penalty was abolished, And well, of course, it was wonderful, But he was happy too, he was against the death penalty, and we find people in places where the death penalty is carried out, even like out in Oklahoma. A lot of the guards, they said, when the governor wanted to start executing people every month, a lot of the employees there said, "We don't, this process, you Anyway, someone went into a tailspin. There was one suicide, I believe. And so the death penalty affects everybody involved. People in general society who are affected little by crime have a right to an opinion, but very often it's just something they heard or read or reacted to without looking into the issue deeper. You know, we can only ask you to look at examine your conscience and say, is this right? Is this wrong? You know, and I don't know. I don't know. It's a tough one, you know. But thank you for listening.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chuck Cohane. Chuck Cohane, everybody. Yesterday, just before they were about to get on a plane, Roderick Reed and Roderick Reed Jr., RJ, learned of some bad news. They learned that the Texas Court of Criminal Appeals had emphatically ordered that Rodney Reed should not have a new trial. Boo is right. Now, it was right here 4 years ago that Roderick and RJ and Rana and Roger and others to be a part of this event and to raise awareness. And they got coverage. They got coverage on the front page of the newspaper in Bastrop County, which is where they're from and where Rodney Reed was convicted. And that annoyed the county prosecutor, and he set an execution date. Texas county prosecutors asked for the execution date. Suddenly, Rodney Reed had an execution date in November. And many, many people got involved. They got involved, and we came here in November, the Friday before that execution date. This court was conferencing. That's what they do. On Fridays, they meet and conference just the 9 unjustices, and if they discussed it, we don't know. But what they didn't do is decide to take the case. Up until then, they hadn't issued anything, and then the Texas Court of Criminal Appeals got involved and ordered an evidentiary hearing. But I want to say that the question before this court, which remains unanswered, is it constitutional to execute a person who can demonstrate their innocence? Is it constitutional to execute a person who can demonstrate their innocence? They've already answered the question, is it constitutional? Is it okay to execute a person who may be innocent? And the answer to that question is yes. That's Herrera versus Collins, and it's an old decision. It basically said as long as you have had due process, then okay. We have seen more and more cases where evidence of innocence is not even allowed to be heard in court. But Rodney Reed got this opportunity. It was a 2-week hearing. I was there, Brandy Slaughter was there, Charles was there, Ali Sullivan was there from Death Penalty Action, and many other people were there. And we heard what went on in that courtroom. They had new witnesses come forward that corroborated the fact that the victim in the case had a relationship with Rodney Reed, a friendly relationship. They said that she was nervous. I heard this testimony myself. She was nervous around her fiance, who we believe is the killer in this case. There were 2 weeks, and it wasn't just some namby-pamby lawyers. This was the top team. They had like 10 people there. Barry Scheck was there. Peter Neufeld was there from the Innocence Project, running that trial. And Judge Langley, when he finally came down with his recommendation to the Texas Court of Criminal Appeals, said that not a single one of them was credible. How can that be? I'll tell you what it is. It's the truth is that it is the truth. And the fact is, the question we should be asking is, how can it be that somebody can sit and hear all of this and say it doesn't matter? My friends, innocence matters. We oppose the death penalty in all cases, but innocence matters. And the fact is, this court doesn't care. Last year in May, they ruled in the Shin decision, Shin versus Ramirez, they ruled that if you are a state defendant raising issues of ineffective assistance of counsel, you no longer have access to the federal courts. And ineffective assistance of counsel is one of the things that often happens when you've got a wrongful conviction. The person who brought that claim was Barry Jones from Arizona. They even knew he was innocent. And Barry Jones, the Arizona prosecutor that argued before this court, acknowledged the possibility of his innocence and said it was irrelevant to the facts of what they were arguing about. I'm not a lawyer, so maybe I got a couple things a little bit skewed, so check with your lawyer friends if you want to write about this, but I want to tell you, that's how it comes out to me, and I think I've got it right. Well, the good news is that there was an election in Arizona and across this country in November, and the attorney general and the governor in Arizona got changed, and suddenly there was openness to the idea of hearing about Barry Jones's innocence. 2 weeks ago today, Barry Jones was freed. Okay, but you got to hear this. He was freed after they had the court ruling, the judge ruled. They took him back to do another processing. And did they let him out to his attorneys and his family and his friends? No, they took him and dropped him off at a post office downtown. No cell phone, no money, no understanding of what it is to be out in the world for the past 30 years. And Barry Jones had to figure it out for himself. He started walking. Meanwhile, they're all wondering, the lawyers and the friends and the family, where's Barry? And they actually had to send out search parties. People went out to look for him. And they found him, and they brought him in, and they brought him home. And I'm super glad also to note that we've raised, it's got to be over $50,000 by now, a ton of money to help him get his life started. But why is that necessary? Because in order for Barry Jones, who everybody acknowledges is innocent, to be freed, in order for a face-saving move, what they had to do, Barry Jones had to plead guilty to a lesser offense and be sentenced to time served, and then he was freed. There's the door, Mr. Jones. You can walk away right now, or we can put you on trial again. What do you prefer? What was Barry Jones technically convicted of that he pled guilty to and got sentenced to 25 years? Not taking the baby to the hospital fast enough. 25 years. Anyway, Barry Jones is free. That's exciting, but this court said it was irrelevant. And then last week there was another decision where they said, get this, federal defendants with legitimate claims of innocence do not matter. Their innocence doesn't matter. For certain circumstances, they don't get access to the courts. What? How can that be? How can that be fair? How can this country and the people of this country accept that? We don't. This court says innocence is irrelevant. And carved into the face of this court building are the words equal justice under law, and that is a lie. Why do we know that? Because the person that's going to come and speak to us next, his brother is a black man, convicted of killing a white woman when the real suspect is a white man. I would say don't get me started, but you already did. Please, welcome and thank you for being here, Roderick Reed and RJ. Can we get you with that banner and come over and is that banner in the camera, Julie? No? You know what? Bring it back behind you. Bring it back behind you, and let's hold it up right back over here.
First, I'd like to give all honor and glory to God for He made it possible for us to be here. And I'd like to thank everybody that has helped donate and everything on our behalf to get me and my son here. My name is Roderick Reed. I am the brother of Rodney Reed, an innocent man on Texas death row. Me and my family have been suffering for over 25 years now. We have not been whole for over 25 years now. My brother was convicted of the murder and rape of Stacy Stites. And since that time, we've been living a nightmare that we cannot wake up from. And the reason I say it's a nightmare is because the truth is out there, but nobody is willing to look at it or pay attention to it. Evidence is out there that proves my brother's innocence, but nobody is admitting it into the court. There's testimonies that have been heard, statements that have been made by medical examiners saying there's no way possible my brother could have committed this crime, but nobody is admitted into the court records. You know, they don't want to allow him a new trial, you know, and they say, well, what do you want as for your brother as, you know, doing these hearings and stuff? I say, let all the evidence be looked at and heard and give him a new trial, and Rodney Reed will free himself. We don't need to free Rodney Reed. The truth will free Rodney Reed. But they will not allow the truth in the courtroom. And that's sad, because justice denied, for one, is a threat to justice for us all. And so it affects you. It affects everybody that hears this, because it can happen to you, because it's happening in my life now. My son here will be 7 years old next month, and he's never had the opportunity to touch my brother, his uncle. He's always had to go see him between glass. I took him 6 weeks after he was born. He went to see my brother, meet his uncle. Every time I go, he go. When I move, he move. We're a family. We're just like that. And that's the reason I'm here standing for my brother, because we're a family, just like that. And it's hard for me to be up here because I am still suffering. I'm still going through things, you know, that words cannot even describe. To other people, it seems like a story, but to me, it's my life. It's the life that I live every day. Every morning I wake up and I think about my brother. How's he doing? What is he eating? How's he being treated? And this has been going on for over 25 years. When is it enough? When will the truth finally step into the courtrooms? When will all our cries be heard by the courts? Because we've done things that has never been done. We've had over 5 million signatures signed for my brother. Around the world, people sign them petitions, over 5 million. We've had over 500,000 faith leaders sign a petition for my brother. We've also had acronyms that are written by active and retired police officers saying they see the corruption in this case. We've had so much happen in this case, but yet my brother is still locked up, you know. And I see why it takes people like us to make this change, because when I first got into this fight, I was strictly just trying to get my brother home. But the more I looked around, the more I listened, the more I learned this is way much bigger than my brother. You know, it's not just about him, because there's 1,000 other Rodney Reeds out there. It's about truth, right, and justice, and doing the right thing. That's what this is about, and showing them that we will not take anything less than that. And so we're here today to let them know that we have been starving for justice. We have been starving for justice for over 25 years. How much longer do you have to starve before you die? And I'm not ready to think about that, because we will bring my brother home, regardless of what goes on. My mother's told the courts back in Bastrop, the day they convicted my brother, she said, you may try to take my son's life, but I guarantee you the whole world will know about it. And so we're letting the whole world know about it. We will not be quiet. We will not gently go out of here. We're going down with a fight with all our lives. Free Rodney Reed.
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 I'd like to now introduce a brother of mine that I've been knowing for quite a few years. He also has a brother that was on death row. He's been standing beside me, supporting my cause, and I his. Mr. Charles Keaton.
Yeah, Charles.
This is my brother. You know, for so many different reasons, our history has finally brought us together. My name is Charles Keith. I'm from Canton, Ohio. I am the Impacted Communities Liaison for Death Penalty Action. And what that means is that I work with families that don't understand the death penalty, what they're going through, how to interact with the media, how to stay together even as a family and not fight and destroy one another. You know, you're on display as a family. My brother was convicted back in 1994. He's the face of the Violent Crime Bill Act, of which President Joe Biden authored. So it took me forever and a day. This has always been my place to get to, Washington, D.C. Now I'm here. You know, I wish I could meet the president. I wish I could say some things to him, but I'm still here to talk to you. Right now, my brother, he's got a pardon sitting on the governor's desk. He also has the opportunity to possibly get out. Now, these are all things of hope, because that's all you have in the death penalty. That's all you have in this stuff is hope. So we got high hope at this time. It hurt me so bad to hear about my brother learning of his family's decision on his way down here to tell the story. I might hear the decision of my brother while I'm down here or possibly on the way home. You know, there's no way that I could possibly get you to understand how that feels. But Roderick knows how I feel. He knows how it feels. The Lucios in Texas, they know how it feels. The Joneses in Oklahoma City, they know how it feels. The Cantus in Texas, they know how it feels. You know, so there's not a whole lot of us. So I can continue to give you little by little names. It hurts so bad. So, you know, we come together as a coalition. It feels so good to have people out here, because I had said earlier today, well, all the people that are out here to save and speak for their loved ones, would they come together? Because this is my brother. This is the sign I elect to hold. Free Kevin Keith. But it wasn't for you out here, my story would still be within me. I wouldn't have a whole lot to say. I used to just cry all the time because I couldn't figure out what to do. And when I stopped crying, my mind just opened up. I said, stop crying and start trying. So what I had to do was learn the law. I had to learn that piece. I had to understand what the lawyers were talking about. I had to understand the documents they were sending me. I says, wow, I'm being educated to be an American. But it's awful funny, I was being treated as if I wasn't American. And that, you know, taking something that back to a poor family, poorly educated family. I mean, we're on display. To try to get my family to understand that people are looking at us, you know, watching everything you do. We are news, you know, and it's sad because they always made sure it was something bad, some kind of bad news. And they was always saying bad things about my brother, things that they could not prove. They did not even have one fingerprint, one footprint, no blood, absolutely nothing, absolutely nothing. So how did this man end up on Ohio's death row? We're still asking that question as a family. But I'd like to say to myself and my family and to all of you, Ted Strickland, he executed so many men. I believe it was 28 men in 4 years. But my brother was one of the ones that he spared. So I cannot, in good conscience, say anything bad about Governor Strickland. You just have to take it with a grain of salt. But he spared my brother. He allowed our family an opportunity to heal a little bit and to fight another fight. But they took him off of death row based on an innocent claim. And then they turned around and gave him life without parole just in case he did it. So I fought the death penalty for 16 years. I've been fighting life without parole for the past 14. I tell people, and I really mean this, I was not educated by Ohio State. I was educated by the state of Ohio. Thank you.
Thank you, Charles, my brother. Thank you, Roderick, my brother. Thank you all, brothers and sisters. We are starving for justice, some of us more than others. Some of us more than others. I want to note that there's 192 death row survivors exonerated from death row. We got 2 more coming. That's Rodney Reed and Kevin Keith and so many more. That's the shocking thing, is how much innocence, the epidemic of wrongful convictions that are happening in this country. I want to mention one other person, Sam Randolph. Sam Randolph was on death row in Pennsylvania for a crime he did not commit. While he was on death row, I think it was in 2009, for some reason, several corrections officers assaulted him, beat him severely. They broke his back, such that he is now paralyzed, and he has been. He lived in a jail cell, in a death row prison cell, for a decade, not having a bath, not having a shower, not having anybody help him, paralyzed. He can't move. He lies down. He can't sit up. He can't walk. He can't even stand up straight. He was exonerated and freed a year ago in April, so a little over a year he's been out. And a doctor has stepped forward, Dr. Ali Mesiwala from California has stepped forward and agreed to operate on Sam and do it for free in his facility, for free. But Sam needs enough money to cover the medical transportation and to cover the physical therapy that will come after the surgery. And we're working to raise $100,000 for him. We're going to put a link in the videos, and it's all over our social media. But there's a QR code on the end of this table here that you can scan and make a donation to help Sam Randolph walk again. You can also just search that, help Sam Randolph walk again. Find it on GoFundMe, chip in as much as you can. If you can think of anybody that can help this man with a few dollars, invite them to do so. Don't ask them, just invite them. You know, people can always refuse an invitation, and it's nothing to say, hey, you want this, yes or no. But if we don't ask, then we're robbing people of the opportunity to help Sam Randolph. So please, invite people to chip in to him, to chip in to each of these men. Roderick and Charles have GoFundMes, because this doesn't happen to people that don't live in poverty. Sometimes a little bit, but these are families that come out of poverty, and we can help them. And that's what we're asking for, in addition to all the other things. The other thing I want to say is that we work, and we are a broad coalition, we work to stop executions for everybody. The next 2 executions scheduled in this country, they're guilty. We know that. We oppose those executions. There's one in Alabama where they're fixing to use the gas chamber for the first time in this country since they did in Arizona. I think in the 1990s was the last one. They're fixing to use nitrogen hypoxia, smothering with nitrogen gas in Alabama, maybe. So there's a little tension between the Attorney General in Alabama and the Department of Corrections in Alabama. We'll see where that goes. And then in Oklahoma, Jermaine Cannon is scheduled to be executed on July 20th. And there may be 1 or 2 in between there. I've not had them listed in my head. But then on September 21st in Oklahoma, Anthony Sanchez is scheduled to be executed. And we believe we have the evidence that shows that he could not have committed that crime and that somebody else did. So you're going to be watching for that. So we're Broad Coalition. We're here if you're just joining us. Starvin for Justice, the 30th annual fast and vigil to abolish the death penalty at the U.S. Supreme Court. 30 years we've been doing this. It's always these dates, June 29th. Can you flip this banner around? It's always these days, June 29th to July 2nd. June 29th being the anniversary of the Furman decision, which struck down all the death penalty laws in the country, forcing states that wanted to have a death penalty to write new death penalty laws. And then July 2nd, June 29th to July 2nd, the U.S. Supreme Court upheld the new laws. There was never a moratorium. There was never abolition. It was a pause, and not a voluntary one. until they wrote new laws, because the moment they wrote a new law and set somebody up on death row, the moment they threaten you with the possibility of death, that's when you get the terror of the death penalty starting. Thank you, sir. Folks are coming up to sign the petitions here. You can sign them online at deathpenaltyaction.org, but they're here at the table. It's great because the last few years we've been dealing with the pandemic, and now we've got buses of tourists coming through and all that. That's why we're here. We're striving for justice. So among the people that are here, I want to introduce a couple of them. Kathy from Georgia. Can somebody take over for Kathy? Georgians for Alternatives to the Death Penalty.
Thank you, Abe. As Abe just said, I am Kathy Harmon Christian. I am the Executive Director for Georgians for Alternatives to the Death Penalty. I came from Atlanta, Georgia to be here. We are starving for justice in Georgia. We're starving for justice all over this country because the death penalty is applied in an unjust way. It is not about life. We do not solve the problems in our society by more killing. We honor the victims, but not by more killing. The death penalty is costly. The death penalty is racist. The death penalty is unjust. And what the question I like to talk to people is what could we be as a society if we could get rid of this and say, this is the bottom line, we will not cross it. 170 nations in the world have abolished the death penalty. 170 nations in the world have abolished the death penalty. We are not one of those nations. Are we not meant to lead with liberty and justice for all? We have to really look at that and say, who gets justice in this country? Who is free? And not just repeat the statement that says we're all free. We're coming on July 4th. We need to interrogate that again, not just repeat festivities and things without really looking at it. I need help in Georgia. We need help to turn the tide in Georgia so that we abolish the death penalty, so that we do not execute people with intellectual disability or with serious mental illness. We have 40 men on death row in Georgia, in Jackson, and we have one woman in Arendelle prison. And we want to get them free. We don't want them to be given a death warrant and to be executed. So I'm asking you today to join me and to join all these fine folks here and talk to people in your families, in your communities. Talk to your legislators. There's nothing more powerful than to call your legislator and say, hey, can I take you for a cup of coffee? And I want to talk to you about abolition of the death penalty. Where do you stand? This is how I stand, and I elected you. So please go and talk to your legislators. Please talk to your family. Make this a discussable issue and turn the tide towards a culture of true life and towards a culture that says, no, we will not do this anymore. End the death penalty now.
Thank you.
Thank you, Kathy Harmon Christian from Georgians for Alternatives to the Death Penalty. We also have an amazing number of people here today from Texas. If you're here from Texas, raise your hand. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. At least 7 people here at the Fast and Vigil from Texas. We've got people from Virginia, Maryland, Ohio, New York. A number of people from New York, Alaska, right here. Alaskans against the death penalty. What else we got? And of course, we've got
South Carolina.
what?
South Carolina.
What? South Carolina. South Carolina. We got Hillary Taylor from, and she brought a gaggle of folks with her. Hillary is the executive director, newly named, of South Carolinians for Alternatives to the Death Penalty. Hillary Taylor. Reverend Hillary Taylor.
Greetings, friends. My name is Reverend Hillary Taylor. I'm a United Methodist minister based out of South Carolina, And as Abe just said, I am the executive director of South Carolinians for Alternatives to the Death Penalty. Our mission is to abolish the death penalty in South Carolina and catalyze criminal justice reform. We seek to rehumanize those who are on death row. We seek to mobilize communities against the death penalty by educating them about the reality of the death penalty's terrible, discriminatory past and the ways that it currently discriminates against people who have darker skin, people who come from working class backgrounds, people who have terrible legal representation, among other things, people with traumatic mental health problems, people with different intellectual disabilities. We use that mobilizing power to help people advocate with power holders and stakeholders and legislators in South Carolina, asking them, will you vote against the death penalty? Will you prohibit the death penalty from being enacted? And then after we advocate against the death penalty, we also restore people who have been impacted by this terrible, terrible system that only produces violence and death. We seek to restore people who have been harmed by the death penalty, helping them find healing through storytelling, through telling the ways that they have been traumatized by the death penalty, through helping them access systems that are for victim family members or people who have become impoverished because they've been supporting a loved one on death row for decades and decades. And the average person on South Carolina's death row has been on there for 20 years. If the death penalty is allegedly for victim families, then why does it take so long for somebody to be executed? That, my friends, is 20 years of just waiting and waiting and waiting and being told, no, you're gonna get your justice. The state is gonna do this on your behalf. All the while not actually giving them all the access they really need to victim services, to money that they could use to pay their bills because a loved one is no longer able to be the breadwinner in their family. It's money that's not being used for college tuition for orphan children, for purchasing diapers for young children, for any kind of therapy and medical expenses that people need in their daily lives, but especially after traumatic violence and traumatic loss. SCADP exists because South Carolina needs to abolish the death penalty. It's a system that hasn't been working for us since we executed our first person in the modern era. That would be 1985 to now. We have people who are still harmed by it, people who years and decades later will say, I'm still just as mad now as I was 30 years ago when my loved one was murdered. There are ways that are more effective at prohibiting violence and deterring violence. We could be doing literally anything, my friends. We could be investing in mental health first aid. South Carolina has the lowest mental health first aid in the country. We are 50th, and that is abysmal. That is a shame. We could be investing in affordable housing. A lot of people are not able to afford where they are living. And if you don't have stability, then yeah, you might turn to a life of crime in order to afford life, in order to afford supporting your family. We could invest in, I don't know, helping people recover from violence in the first place, or helping to stop violence. We could be investing in systems that meet people who are victims of gun violence in the hospital as a kind of like system or citizens' response, helping people to heal and say that there's somebody in your community who loves you and cares about you and is counseling you against retaliation. South Carolina is a state that has executed the 8th largest number of people in our country historically. That's a lot. We are not a big state, but it's not surprising when you think about how the death penalty actually has its root in racial terror. South Carolina, of course, is the state that seceded from the Union, that kicked off the Civil War, has been a resting place for Jim Crow laws, and was a home place of the Dixiecrats, right? This is stuff that is in my ancestry. This is stuff that we don't talk about very often. But man, when it shows up, you know, because somebody has a picture with the Confederate flag and then they go and they shoot a church full of people with darker skin than them. Man, it is awful. And we could be doing so much more instead of just giving somebody who enacts terrible violence the death penalty. What if we stopped that in the first place, right? You pay for it in the beginning or you pay for it at the end. And South Carolina wants to be the forefront of changing the way that people in South Carolina function, the way that South Carolina functions as far as its politics. Here in South Carolina, I hope that you will come and talk to me about ending the death penalty in South Carolina, especially if you are from South Carolina. We have a lot of work to do, my friend. South Carolina has the distinct shame of having executed the youngest person in the United States history. His name was George Stinney Jr. He was a 14-year-old teenager who was falsely accused of murdering 2 white girls. And really the only reason that people pinpointed it on him is because he was a black child who was the last person to see these 2 young white children go and try to pick flowers. That's all that happened. And somebody else's malfeasance took advantage of those girls. And then it's likely that person who committed the murder was part of the search team that said, George Stinney did it. And it took 83 days between the time that George Stinney was arrested, not allowed to see his family, tried, convicted, and executed. That is a shame that we live with in South Carolina. And if you want to change that piece of South Carolina's present, because we still do terrible things and we incarcerate children and try them for adult sentences. The death penalty, my friends, it's not just that when you're not allowed to execute certain people who are poor and are not able to advocate for themselves, it just sort of mutates into some other kind of injustice. If you are tired of this injustice, I hope that you will join me, come and talk to me. There are ways that we can connect you to what we are doing in South Carolina to resist death-dealing practices and to cultivate life and to cultivate justice. Thank you.
Thank you, my sister. Hello, Taylor, everybody. We have another sister here representing another ally and partner and leader in this movement, the Catholic Mobilizing Network, Attorneys of the Death Penalty. We usually abbreviate it as CMN, but Sister Eileen Riley is here. Sister Eileen is going to come up and give us a few words, maybe a little prayer to close us out.
I want to begin my few words with thank you, thank you, thank you. Thank you to all of you who have come out for this wonderful event. It's always so encouraging each year to find out that there are people from across this country that stand where we stand. At Catholic Mobilizing Network, we say we're about 3 things: prayer, advocacy, and education. So we're a national Catholic organization working to mobilize Catholics, just as our name says, to get involved with you and all your efforts in your states. We're about prayer, first of all, so join us on the first Friday of each month online, and we pray for anyone to be executed in the coming month. We're about education, so as we learn about these various cases that people have been speaking about, we have a unique opportunity to educate Catholics across the country and hopefully start to change some minds and hearts. And finally, we're about advocacy, and so again, if you go to our website, there are action alerts, there are advocacy actions. We want to call out the boards of pardons and paroles, the governors, all those involved in executions to say, we're watching you, we see what you're doing, we know what you're doing, and it must stop. So join Catholic Mobilizing Network, go on our website, you'll see some of what we do. And once again, thank you, thank you, thank you.
Thank you, sister. We are here starving for justice. It's a 96-hour fast and vigil to abolish the death penalty. We're going to wind it down for now with this rally, but we'll be back at 6 p.m. tonight, tomorrow night, Saturday night, Sunday night. If it happens to be raining, we'll be inside that building right over there. We're going to be able to do that, Scott? Sure we will. And many of us are fasting. If you're fasting, raise your hands. you can self-define your fast. I choose to do water only. Some people, well, you can liquefy a hamburger, and you're doing liquids only, right? So there you go, John. We've got 4 more days, 3.5 more days of being here. So each evening, and tonight we're going to hear a little bit more from Chuck. We're going to hear from Congressman Glenn Ivey. We're going to hear from somebody else is coming tonight. Sorry, we don't have. We'll get the list out, but it's coming. And tonight, and tomorrow night, the next night, and the next night. That's when you want to be here, 6 o'clock, to hear these voices of experience. So, signing off from Starvin for Justice, the 30th annual Fast and Vigil to abolish the death penalty at the U.S. Supreme Court. Check out deathpenaltyaction.org. Sign the petitions and visit the websites of all of our partners to get involved where you're at. Thank you.